They're sexy, they're funny, they don't take themselves too seriously.
We were considered the, I guess, the Three Musketeers.
It was a new phenomenon that hadn't existed before. We rocked and rolled that era.
Someone thought I stood out because I was pretty and people liked to see me get chopped up.
I loved what I did. We were treated like queens.
That's more like it.
I'd recommend this show to anybody. Anybody who's into smut.
Drive-in movies, B-movies, had been a product of the 50s and 60s. It was where you took your date when teenagers wanted to escape the parents' house.
The whole baby boomer market was in direct line with the drive-in movies because, you know, you come back from the war, you know, you can't always afford a babysitter, but you can bring the kids with you. And oftentimes the A film is the one the kids can watch, and by the time they're asleep, the B movie is the one that you get to watch alone with your wife or your girlfriend, right? And so the B movie was usually the one that was more interesting and gritty. And that created kind of a market, I think, for the independent film.
There was no such thing as home video and no television for any kind of show of the level or quality that we could muster independently. There was only the drive-in as an outlet.
From the early 60s to the late 60s, when the MPAA started coming about with the rating system, you saw a lot of outrageous stuff back then. That's when Herschel Gordon Lewis and Dave Friedman, who just passed away, were kicking ass.
Have you ever had an Egyptian feast?
These films filled a vacuum. Big studios didn't make the sort of exploitation films that they might have in the 60s and 70s.
We started out with a movie called Alien Dead and went to New York with it and showed it around. And the thing that we realized in calling other people who we knew is that in the drive-in, there was no way to make a profit. I mean, the way the distributors handled your stuff and the way they reported to you and the way they lied to you and cheated you, you were just out of luck. They used to have an old saying that the way it worked is at the end of the night, they'd take all the money from the box office and throw it up in the air, and whatever stayed in the air was your cut.
That era, the late 70s into the early 80s, saw it was like the last gasp of exploitation films theatrically.
And then the drive-in theaters kind of went away when the video market came along. Video kind of killed the drive-in theaters.
And I think that was just because of real estate. I mean, drive-ins took up huge amounts of land, and especially in bigger metropolitan areas, it was just unheard of. I remember when I came out to LA, there were still a handful of operating drive-ins, but within a matter of years, they were virtually all gone. So where was the next thing? The alternate entertainment became, home video.
Where suddenly you could rent a movie to watch at your own free will. You didn't have to wait for it to appear on television. You didn't have to drive to the theater to see it.
And now you could have movies in your home. Unheard of before that. And nobody but movie stars or millionaires could have their own screening room, their own prints of movies and so forth. The home video revolution obviously changed the game. Videotape has been around for 25, 30 years, but suddenly everybody had it. And there was a market. These sort of films filled a big niche in that market.
And so it was a natural, almost like a tag team, as the drive-in theaters are dying, they're kind of handing the baton over to the video stores, and other video stores are taking a run with them. The video stores are the new drive-in theaters.
How are you today? Get something for you?
You got that chainsaw movie?
I'll get it.
Almost anything you had, I don't care how old it was worth something.
It was very exciting because no matter what you had come up with, if it had some sort of commercial appeal, you could pitch it And you were literally getting cash flow based on ideas, based on concepts.
And they would have lurid box covers, like the monsters carrying off the naked girl, and weird titles, like Sorority Babes in the Slimeball Bolorama, or Bad Girls from Mars.
People were doing the kind of things that the drive-ins used to do. Okay, we can't compete in spectacle and star value, but we're going to throw in nudity and car crashes and exploding heads and that kind of stuff.
You couldn't see any of the off-mainstream films on television. Now the video market came along, and some of the first things out in video were the low-budge movies. And now all of a sudden people are getting kind of an interest in titillation. Ooh, let's see this one, let's see that one.
And it created this feeding frenzy.
Sending mom and pop stores and your Blockbuster videos out to find material, more product to fill those shelves with.
So the mom and pop, the corner video store, they would take these things and you could really make some money. And it was different than the drive-in because the cost of the cassette was only a few dollars. The box, and there wasn't a lot of advertising. There's no television advertising. There was no billboards for the latest release. So it was almost impossible for the distributor to hide all the money from you.
And a number of filmmakers like Fred Olen Ray, Jim Wynorski, Roger Corman, Dave Dakota, all started making made-for-video movies. That's what really launched my career. I was working constantly in those films.
It's funny when you talk about the girls that made these movies, there are only 3 that you would ever talk about really with any lasting fame, and that would be Michelle, Brinke, and Linnea. And I think each one of them had something completely different. They were all 3 different people, and they all fit in different types of roles.
Certainly none of them set out to be stars in cult films and exploitation films. None of them. I mean, their goals were all quite different.
I think I'm lucky that I had the path to become a scream queen, considering that I was a very shy girl and I could have stayed in Iowa and worked at a factory or at the John Deere plant and never gone anywhere in my life. So I think I'm pretty lucky.
Ah, Hollywood. The name still carries a ring of magic everywhere in the world. All the glitter, the glamour, and excitement. This is the place where movies are made. Hi, I'm Brinke Stevens, and as an actress, I'm a part of that world.
I don't think anyone's from Hollywood. We just wind up here. It's like the country is tipped in this direction. We all kind of fall into it, you know?
I grew up in a very small town outside San Diego, California. There were 400 residents. Everybody had horses and chickens and dogs. So it was a very rural, safe environment to grow up in.
Here's how I prepare for all my big scenes.
My childhood was really, really fun. We had cabins like in Protestine, Wisconsin, and we went and boated, swam, water skied, went on vacations, things like that.
I grew up in Simi Valley, California, where I reside now. I had brothers and sisters, a single mother. Spent a lot of my time reading, going to school. I'd be babysitting across the street with the people who had a television. And I'd stay up till 2 in the morning because Attack of the Mushroom People was on. And I think right back then, horror movies were always sparked in me. Even when I was young, I think that was the only avenue that I had.
I had my friends over and we watched Creature Feature every Friday night and would have pizza and would pretend we were, you know, the characters in the movies.
Here I go, I'm a demon, watch.
When Star Trek came out in the 60s, I shaved my eyebrows and pushed them up so I looked like Mr. Spock. And I was probably known as about the weirdest kid in school. Nobody really associated with me.
No, she's not so hot. I saw her once. She could open a beer bottle with those buck teeth of hers.
When I got into probably middle school, I got very, very shy. And middle school and high school, I was about the shyest person you would meet. If you called on me, I would turn beet red and not say a word.
You know, Linnea is about, I guess, maybe, 5'0", and probably weighs less than 100 pounds. Just a sweet little girl.
I think what made me just change is that my dad took over another college, which was in California, and it was like a whole new door opened up. I got into working at Jack LaLanne's health spa, and I met these girls that were models and went to the discos, and I went and I thought, well, maybe I can be a model too. When I got Psycho from Texas, I was doing the modeling and someone came in, they were looking for just a small part of a girl that, gets this guy coming after her, pouring beer on her, making her dance naked. I thought, wow, I'm really, making a step up here in the business. And I started getting a little bit away from the shyness. Even though it was there, I was overcoming it.
So what do you have?
I married Mr. Bauer when I was very young. I think I was 17 years old. Moved from Simi Valley to the San Fernando Valley. And I was working in a car wash, pumping gas at an Exxon gas station. I saw an ad in the paper. I was always checking the paper for something just a little bit better, a little bit different. And there was an ad that said, figure models wanted, $75 a day. Woohoo! Honey, look, you think I could do this? I was a free spirit, if you will. So I was very comfortable with my body. Thought I'd give it a shot. So that brought me into the Los Angeles area, kept me in the metro area, and I just stayed very busy with that for quite a few years.
In college, I went to San Diego State University and I double majored in biology and psychology. My goal was to study dolphin communication. From there, I went into Scripps Institute of Oceanography and was in the doctoral program working with seals. So I left Scripps with a master's degree and went to work for National Marine Fisheries. Eventually in San Diego, the science jobs started to dry up. So in 1979, I accepted a marriage proposal from my college sweetheart, Dave Stevens. I moved to Los Angeles, and I was intending to get a science job in LA, but I didn't realize that there isn't a lot of science that happens here. So one day I was walking past a casting office, and the door was open. I didn't realize what it was, but I saw all these movie posters on the wall. And I'm like, ooh, that's kind of fun. What is that?
It's an old story where, an actress or a woman who wants to make a living goes into a certain line, like modeling, and then does a lateral step into motion pictures and so on, and pursues that. We see that going back to the dawn of motion pictures.
And I kind of thought, well, I'll do this until I can find a science job. While I was married to Dave Stevens, he was working on a comic book called The Rocketeer, which later became a Disney movie. So I was the model for Betty Page in the comic book, and it would be my body, my poses, but with her face on it.
Brinke was a fangirl because she was married to Dave Stevens for a while and was part of the whole famous monster scene. She went to events over at Fari Ackerman's place and so forth like that. And I was aware of her long before I met her, and she had a little bit of a name in the horror community.
And because I was working on movie sets all the time, I responded to an ad in Dramalog for Slumber Party Massacre. Well, at that time, movies were still playing in theaters, and when I first watched it and I saw myself on the big screen, I thought, wow, I can act. Maybe I have a future in this. So then I really seriously started to pursue it around 1982. At that point, I decided I wanted to be an actress.
The nudity and being deaf in Savage Streets was really hard because usually as an actress you rely on something like your voice to get something across, like screaming or making a sound. And I couldn't make any sounds or do anything but just react.
If you look at some of Linnea's very early stuff, people have seldom been able to tap that, where they give her something real to do.
also it was dealing with something that was kind of forbidden and hadn't really been done that graphically before, besides maybe Last House on the Left or something. I think that the film that really started me being seen by people was Return of the Living Dead.
The Return of the Living Dead.
It took a while after it came out, but it started this movement where a lot of girls back then would not do nudity. They would not do, even toplessness and anything like that. And they certainly, wouldn't do a Return of the Living Dead where they're on a gravestone nude and stepping on dead people.
Well, at that time, I'd do a spread for Penthouse. I had done a Penthouse centerfold, and they'd back it up. When you worked for Penthouse, you joined the softball team, and you traveled around, and they would do videos now to accompany the layout. So we did a layout, and it would also be videotaped at the same time, and that was their new market. That you could also have the magazine, but you could have the live video of the girls live on video. So then Playboy Channel followed suit. Playboy started doing a lot of videos and going to cable. That's where cable TV and video became very popular. It was on a Playboy video that I was doing that I met Paul Hertzberg. And he then said, I have this friend of mine who's casting this movie that I really think you should go out for.
I was looking for an Egyptian vampire priestess. Paul Hertzberg says, Fred, I have this girl I want you to meet. And he said she knows all the best dirty jokes.
She's one of the guys. There's nothing masculine about her at all. She's the kind of guy that you'd say, hey, let's go out for a beer.
So I go in and I read for this vampire movie. It's like, oh, brother, and I go in and read, and I meet Freddle and Ray.
So she came in, and she did very well. And she looked like an Egyptian vampire priestess to me.
Had no desire, was just working. Another job that came through the door. So this was the first for real thing that came along my way, and Fred opened up lots of doors for me.
May I come in?
My, whose little girl are you? And another one, just as pretty. I bet all the boys are glad we have these pretty girls in the audience today, aren't you, boys?
I had worked with Linnea on Creepazoids, and then I was getting ready to do Sorority Babes in the Slime Ball Bolorama, and that was, I think, 87. And I talked to Fred, I think it was Fred who introduced me to Michelle, and somehow I got a hold of Brinke, and I just needed I needed as many girls as possible that would also be willing to do the nudity. And I knew that all these girls had done it before, so I kind of explained to them what I was looking for, and everybody came on board. Nobody auditioned.
I was never particularly uptight about nudity. I went to a nude beach in San Diego called Black's Beach on weekends, so the nudity didn't bother me.
I had done nudity with Linnea in Creepazoids, and I said, on this one, I don't think I'm going to have you do it. And I'm just going to have you, play a tough girl. It'll be fun. That's why she wanted to do it.
Calvin, is this a friend of yours? Sort of.
Yeah, dream on, Toad. The spider character was really fun to play, and that's what I'd rather do. It's more interesting to play a character that's either tough or mean or something than just, like a bimbo or, the nice girl. Assholes.
I needed girls who had done movies before and who had, were reliable, that could pull this off. And so we put it all together, and I think Sorority Babes was the first. That was certainly the first movie where I worked with all three girls.
Oh, baby. Fantastic! Wow, what channel is this?
In those days, when video started taking off, they needed an angle, a hook. So nudity was required in the films, at least toplessness.
You ever feel that you're hired just for your willingness to do nude scenes and that you're just a piece of set decoration? It must get frustrating.
I think usually we are just hired for that, at least in the beginning of my career. I was one of those girls that could work, would be willing to work, would be willing to do nudity, and could act at the same time. So they started hiring me more than the girls that would just do nudity.
You know, the average guy before that would maybe see how many movies a year? 20, 30, if you really love movies, maybe 40, 50. Well, now there's a video store down the street. Now you're watching probably a movie almost every night. People are watching into the hundreds of movies, so the saturation was there. And we couldn't make them fast enough. They couldn't see them fast enough.
So, you know, VHS wasn't just a phenomenon in the United States, it was a phenomenon worldwide. And they were selling these things for $89.95 a piece, so there was a real business there.
Ist seine Frau da mitgekommen?
Nein, Toni hat uns gesagt, sie könne kein Blut sehen.
And then what you find, or what we found in these films, is that eventually the girls who weren't the named stars started becoming stars. They started becoming known. And soon, you didn't need Eric Estrada or Jan Michael Vincent. Soon, those girls themselves were enough of a name on a box cover that people would go, oh, look there, oh, look at that, this is their new film, or whatever.
Suddenly, you've got women who are stars of horror movies. They're young and beautiful, and they're willing to take their clothes off. So we were a big hit with the fans.
These films aren't designed for great dramatic roles. They're designed to get the monsters in and out. They're designed to get naked breasts bouncing across and whatever.
So that's why the sexy horror comedy works so well. It's hard to fail. It was hard to fail at that time. There's an independent vibe in a lot of these films because you didn't have to play theater. You didn't have to strike a 35 print. You didn't have to put $1 million in prints and ads like we would on Armed Response or Cyclone or something. You know, you could kind of, you know, do what you had to do, and there was a market.
And since these movies were shot on film, there had to be a certain amount of technical knowledge to be able to pull off a micro-budget or low-budget movie on motion picture film, whether it be 16 millimeter or 35 millimeter. So if you were able to do it and come in on budget, you pretty much worked all the time.
Yeah, I mean, people have access to the technology now, so they can make films much, logistically much, more easy than we could have. We did at the time. But when we made a film, it sort of was important. It was important for what it was. It fit a niche. It fit a slot in the program schedule. And for example, when HBO had their first promo that they would show in between each movie, there was a clip of me in Virgin High in that promo.
At the end of class, we'll have a little demonstration. But first, let's discuss the basics.
I think the late 80s, early 90s is probably the most exciting time for filmmakers in this country. I think a lot of people's careers were made at that time who would not have had a career otherwise. I feel like I would not have made my own independent films. I would not have formed my own company. I would not have achieved the library of films had that period of time not come along.
And the best actress in a B- movie is Linnea Quigley.
Well, thank you very, very much. I want to thank, oh God, this is great. I like it. And I also want to thank the Ricks and the Richards and the Kevins and the Freds who have done these movies, and the Michelles and the Moniques and the Brinkes that have done these movies with me, and Don, and all my dogs and cats and everybody. Thank you. I like it.
I think that Linnea, Michelle, and I always had a very blue-collar attitude about working. We didn't set out to become movie stars. We just wanted to work.
There was so much going on then that you'd be working 7-8 days a week, 20-hour days.
Everybody usually was, the same DP, the same art director. It was like a family.
It was organized. It was efficient.
Something needed to be moved to go from one set to another. Heck, you're the one grabbing a lamp and the cords and helping move. Everything was just very low budget. You
had 70 to 80,000 maybe to make a film. And that's with music, that's with everything.
So that meant, what? You could shoot for 6 days? 10 days would be a luxury. 5 days would be pushing it a little bit, but we did. We did a couple in 5 days. David Dakota, I think, made one in 4. I've never tried. 4 days is not for me.
Fred and I were laughing about it because it's really tough to make a movie in 35 millimeter in less than a week. But I had been friendly with Ken Hall, and I went to him one night, and in a crazy sort of like, idea, I said, why don't we try a script called Sorority Succubus Sisters? We set it in the house, we get the 3 girls, and we go.
I think from the time Dave and I discussed it, I think I wrote the script in 7 days, which was, I think, still my personal best record for knocking out a script.
And so I brought the girls in, and the whole project was designed for the 3 girls, and, starting out as nerds and becoming super sex victims.
They have but one chance left to save their immortal souls. Don't.
Guys, I'm getting scared.
Why are only the girls in danger?
Because they are far more sensitive. They are attuned to the psychic vibrations.
There's a scene with the 3 of them, 3 hopeless nerds sitting on a couch, just lined up, 1, 2, 3, and they've got this long dialogue scene, and it's about a 5 or 6 minute scene straight through. These are people who have been acting for maybe 2 or 3 years maximum. They're carrying it off, and they take a 5 minute no cuts scene, and it plays wonderfully.
Who cares? They're guys.
We kind of all looked at each other and kind of went, wow, this is fun.
Do you want to play with me? My mommy and daddy are gone, and we're all alone. Let's play doctor.
I walk into the set on the first day, and in the dining room is Brinke Stevens, Linnea Quigley, and Michelle Bauer, absolutely and completely naked, oiled down with this great lighting on them. I was like, hey man, this was not in the script. And I actually didn't know if I was going to be able to concentrate because I have this natural reaction to beautiful naked women.
How Dave Dakota recorded the longest bathtub scene in the world in Nightmare Sisters.
I ran out of things to do in the bathtub. How many times can I drop the soap? And I'm at the beginning. It's like I don't have anybody to soap in front of me, so I'm like, okay, I'll have to turn around this way. Okay, now what do we do? And it went on forever.
I don't want to explain it. I just want to enjoy it. Yeah, me too.
Then it almost was like, name that tune. I could name that tune in how many notes. I can do that movie in how many days. So people would say, oh yeah, I've been on this movie for 3 months. I said, that is not true because that doesn't exist. There's 5-day movies, 3-day movies.
Dave showed me then how to make a 4 or 5 day movie. I basically learned filmmaking on that set.
Hollywood Chance of Hookers we shot at Movie Tech Studios in Hollywood, which is basically a big shoebox. So we'd be at one end shooting the lair of Gunnar Hansen and all those guys, the bad guys who were the cult. On the other end would be the hotel room. So we do the hotel room, and then while we're shooting in the cult area over there, they'd be painting it, and now it becomes the office. And then we go into an office scene. Then we go back, we do a couple scenes in the cult, and then go back, and now it would be the living room. And that's how they kept going, bouncing back and forth. And that's how they were able to shoot an entire film in 5 days.
You go as far as the money goes. And you try to do a smoke and mirrors job to make it look and make people think that you spent more and that it was good.
Talk about cutting it close, huh? For a minute there, I thought you were going to turn me into chop suey.
Well, I should have.
We could make a lot of films, but they couldn't pay a lot.
On these short movies, it's very tough on the actors because you have a massive page count per day, and there's a lot of dialogue. And these girls always nailed it. Always one take.
Who died and made you queen of the hive, huh?
We racked up so many credits and accumulated such a fan base that it just took off. It was like the Wild West.
I was blown away.
It was all of a sudden like Premiere Magazine, People Magazine, hard copy.
Brinke Stevens spends her work hours with killers and corpses and blood and guts and shock and horror and loves every minute of it. Because Brinke's the biggest female name in today's B-grade horror movies.
I was being flown all over the country for talk shows. I rode in limousines. It was quite luxurious. I was a guest of honor at fan conventions.
It was an e-ticket ride with no stop. It was so much fun.
From her ability to yell out in terror in horror films, Brinke Stevens has this nearly rhyming title. Jean.
What is Scream Queen?
Correct.
Somebody coined the term Scream Queens, and Linnea, Michelle, and I were really the first Scream Queens.
And I don't even know that any of them really realized that they were creating the Scream Queen, because before them you had you had Fay Wray, you'd had Janet Leigh, you'd had Jamie Lee Curtis, but Brinke and Linnea and Michelle kind of created a new vision of what a Scream Queen was.
The whole avenue of somebody that's really getting into it and really likes, getting killed or, doing the killing. And I said, I'm going to embrace being a Scream Queen instead of like these other girls that just kind of, said, oh no, I'm not a Scream Queen, I'm a real actress, I do real movies. And I just said, well no, this is what I do B movies, I do horror films, and I embraced it instead of just erased it.
And every time I see you in the movies, you're some kind of man-killing, demon-possessed punk goddess or something. Is that kind of what you become known for?
I think so, because that's the other side of me, the evil one that's going out and doing all that thing. And in normal life, I'm really kind and everything. I wouldn't even, swat a fly.
Hollywood usually puts you where it wants to put you. If you're good at something, that's what you're going to do. Which is fine by me. I don't mind being typed. I like being typed. That's great. When you're typed, you work,
Well, they were right in the heyday of it, that's for sure. And one film after another, it got to be where it's kind of like pulp, because it's high saturation. You watch one of those films, it's a short watch. I don't think we ever made a movie longer than 90 minutes.
It was really fandom that latched onto us and elevated us with their appreciation.
They're three of the sweetest people I've ever met in my life. And I think that comes through. I think audiences genuinely fall in love with these women.
I know. If I wasn't talking about myself, I wouldn't believe it either. Oh, let's go back to the house and see what the guys are doing. Okay.
These girls were on it for the first time, were reachable. You could connect with them through a fan club, and they would personally write you back.
Hi, this is Comic Con Television, Channel 3. Tune in at midnight to see more of me. I'll be looking for you.
Since I was so used to doing conventions as a fan, it was an easy transition to sit behind the table and do conventions as a celebrity.
I remember the first time that I met Brinke at a Fangoria convention in Chicago when I was 19 years old. I remember I had to wait in line for over an hour to see her because the line wrapped all the way around the tables at the convention just for her to appear.
Besides just signing autographed photos, I produced my own comic book. I had 6 issues of that. And I did trading cards.
Play some bridge?
T-shirts, just lots and lots of anything I could do with merchandise, So I'd carry my suitcase of merchandise. I felt like a traveling salesman.
Call Brinke Stevens, our hotline.
I didn't know I had a fan following until I went to my first Fangoria convention.
Now our escort for this little jaunt, none other than the queen of the bees herself, Linnea Quigley.
Hi, I'm Linnea Quigley for MTV's The Big Picture, and I'm at the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors. Why don't you come with me? Let's see what lurks behind this door.
Both Linnea and Brinke were very focused on where they were going and what they were doing. They actually introduced me to the circuit of the conventions. I had no idea. I didn't have a fan club. I was just working. And I really grew to appreciate the fans at that time and knew that they were what was keeping me alive. That here I was working, going crazy. And now I just realized why.
Hi, my name's Tony Brown, and I am a Scream Queen fanatic.
For the most part, horror fans are wonderful people. They're misfits, but they're really intelligent and creative people.
Hey guys, so what I want to do is I want to bring the thrill of the movies to life, and I thought what better way than a board game. Get together with a few friends and play, and so I went ahead and I made this board game.
I've enjoyed 99.9% of all my encounters with the fans. They're very supportive and devoted. Rarely have I encountered any crazy psycho people.
I have very, very good friends, very close friends that started as fans in my life, even to this day. Some of them have been a little kooky, some a little obsessed.
Some obsessions can be healthy. I, for example, am obsessed with you.
But for the most part, just normal. But very interesting, to say the least.
I own a lot of Linnea, Brinke, and Michelle movies. It seems like they get harder and harder to track down.
Very similar people as in the soap operas that send fan mail. They want to know everything about your life, your private life. Are you married? Do you have kids? You know, what kind of upbringing did you have? And they want to know more about you than just the fun of the film. They want to become your pal.
There's a walk you got to do with fans. Because if you let them in a little bit, they want in more, depending on the person, of course. And you've got to know when to kind of stay friends, but not friends, and keep your distance.
There is the problem with fans that will go overboard. I know of several cases involving one of the three women where they received, over a period of several years, pages that a fan has torn out of some European stroke book, and just stuffed in an envelope and sent off to her, occasionally inscribing it personally. I want to put my nini in your nunu, and just some sort of other puerile inscription. And this was a grown-up, and she knew the guy. And she told him, please don't do this. No, it doesn't turn me on. No, it doesn't make me laugh. Stop it. And it just kept up. You get that sort of stuff.
At one point, I got a knock on my door, opened it up, and there's two guys standing there in business suits. So I thought they were peddling some religious stuff, and I said, I'm not interested. And they whip out FBI badges. So I invited them in. I'm like, what's this all about? I'm thinking, have a fan club, go to jail. You know, what? Why are they here? Well, it turned out there was some crazy guy that was captured on the White House lawn with a gun. He was going to kill the president. And they found my fan club address written on the front of his notebook. So they thought somehow I was connected with him, but he had never written me. I was able to go back through my letters and assure them that I had had no contact with him. But whew.
Man, I must have seen this 16 times. It's been on cable for at least a month. Who writes this junk? It's pathetic.
A lot of the guys that were watching these movies, and I hear this from fans of these things, they just remember, okay, they were at a certain age, they were hitting puberty or whatever, and they saw these girls and went hubba hubba.
I think a lot of people that see these movies get an idea that, there's kind of a loose kind of morals to it. And they have to understand we're just having fun. We're normal people living in the valley, and just having fun.
I was expecting a good tip, but that was ridiculous.
These things were actually fun and funny. You could actually run them on USA Up All Night, take the nudity out, and you still have something fun to watch. Of course, it's more fun with the nudity, and that's what I think a lot of these guys do remember and fondly.
I get so horny.
Yes, there is a stigma attached to these sort of films, and there always has been.
The distributor of this film, TriStar Pictures, which is co-owned by Columbia Pictures, CBS, and Home Box Office, pulled the commercial out of release after a week of protest by parents led by a Milwaukee group. But there's no question in my mind that the showing of Santa with an axe on free TV and commercials is sick and sleazy and mean-spirited. Shame on you. Now, as for the film, I've got news for you. It's worse than the TV ads. You people have nothing to be proud of, even if you made a few bucks off of all the negative publicity. Your profits truly are blood money.
I was in Mexico City filming Treasure of the Moon Goddess, and I got a call from my agent, and he said, oh my God, there's this uproar on this movie you did, Silent Night, Deadly Night. And I said, why? I mean, it's just a slasher film. And he said, well, it's like everybody's like going nuts. The parents are wanting it banned, and so I missed it because I was in Mexico for a couple months filming. But I heard, and I've seen video of it, of the mothers, you know, going nuts over the commercials, but I love that. I think a lot more people saw the film than maybe wouldn't have because of that.
I think people tend to combine porn and horror into one lump, which is very unfortunate because they're two very different things.
You gals in the B movies are never appreciated. You know,
Not by the mainstream
scream queens
public,
are just
no.
never get the respect that they're due.
That's why your show and the fans that I have really make me feel like I've accomplished something. It was extremely difficult to prove to Hollywood that I could be an A-list actress. I thought, oh, I'll just do B movies for a couple of years and then I'll move on. But I never moved on. It never happened, partly because of that glass ceiling.
I think they took me less seriously as an actress, saying, oh, she's doing those kind of films. They didn't think I could do maybe something else. You know, that's what I liked to put besides just horror with the Silent Night, Deadly Nights, along with some comedy too, so that they could see I could do both.
Honestly, I might as well have done porn as far as they were concerned, because they had never heard of these films. And I actually had an agent say, well, I don't have any connections with these kind of movies, so I don't know if I can get you any jobs in them. I said, I've been getting jobs in these kind of movies. I was hoping you'd take me to the next level.
And they kept saying, you know, you got to use other names. You can't say what your real name is when you're doing these little films, because it's not good for your image. Oh, and by the way, can you get me some more copies of Hollywood Chancellor Hookers?
It was one of those things that all the agents like to laugh about. They like to tell their friends that they represented the director of it, but it didn't actually get me any work. But I mean, that one film has done a lot of business, and it's generated a lot of interest. I remember Maxim magazine, when they did their top 50 greatest B films of all time, it was number 4.
All the studio heads loved those movies, but they wouldn't use the actors in them.
Once I did what I did, everybody in my normal life calls it porn or softcore porn, and they use that word freely, and they have their idea in mind of what it is, because all they know is that you are willing to take off all your clothes and simulate sex with a man or a woman, and that to them is like, I would never do that. So in my life, I choose to not tell anyone ever that I meet that I ever did it, that I actively do it. I keep it a secret. If they find out, it's on their own, and just they happen to stumble on it. I never volunteer that because of the negativity that I still to this day get.
People start to mark you. You get to be known as something because people need to put a stamp on you. Oh, he's the guy that does this. Oh, she's the girl that's known for that. And I kind of was obstinate about it. I said, well, I'm going to make the films I want to make. You know, and if they want me, they want me. If they don't, they don't. You know.
My parents were not happy about the fact that I left academia. They really wanted me to be a doctor or a scientist or something. So they were really sketchy about the B-movie thing. And when I would try to show my parents my movies, of course I would have to cut out the nudity. I'd have to cut out my death scenes because my mother would not want to see my gory demise.
Time to pump out your blood, Victoria.
Jesus, no! My mother always wondered why my movies were 38 minutes long when I showed them to her, but I'm like, oh, that's the trend. They're all short these days.
My mom, they snuck into graduation day, and they, because I would take an erase in the TV guides when there weren't like 500 channels, when I was in fairy tales where I had nudity, so they couldn't see it. And they did see me in graduation day, and I had topless scene, and I get killed. And my mom was more concerned about me being dead. She was calling me, "Are you all right, honey?" You know. and saying all that. She hated to see me die in a film.
Okay, the first thing we do is you put a finger on my divider.
Hey! I don't do lesbian scenes.
No, silly. This is the diviner.
Back in the day when I used to go to some sci-fi conventions, girls would come up to me and say, oh, they'd like to work with us. And I'd say, oh, are you an actress? They said, I'm a scream queen. And then I would say, what's your name? And I always said, if I haven't heard of you, you're not a scream queen.
Of course, anything that is popular will be imitated. When they started coming out with magazines like Scream Queens Illustrated, suddenly any girl that had ever been photographed and appeared in the magazine said, well, I'm a scream queen.
These girls will do one or two things, or some of them, I don't know if they've even been in front of a camera, but they're all of a sudden scream queens or, horror movie actresses and so forth. And it's like, I haven't seen anything you've done because, most of the stuff never even gets distributed.
The other girls that did come in afterward definitely did destroy it for us because we were going to conventions. They were paying us good money to come to the conventions. And then a bunch of girls in very scantily clad outfits were kind of just going to the guys, here's a picture of me. Oh, that'll be $10. Here's a picture of me, $10. And there were a lot of guys that didn't know what to do. They said, okay, here's $10. And then when they came up to us, they didn't know if we were going to be like that and, try to rip them off.
So it really muddied the field where suddenly all of these models and mud wrestlers and porno girls were calling themselves scream queens.
It became a term or a title that didn't mean anything anymore.
To say that Linnea and Brinke and Michelle were the only ones who were successful at it would be inaccurate because you had a pretty good handful of other girls who did work just as hard and who do deserve to be called scream queens. You've got Maria Ford and Debbie Rochon, one of the hardest working actresses in the business, and Julie Strain, who, isn't so much a scream queen as in like a B-movie queen, just, kind of covered all media. And Felissa Rose, came back many years later and made a name for herself. And in the early 2000s, you had Tanya Dempsey, and nowadays you've got Tiffany Shepis, who's very proudly, I think, wearing the crown, the Scream Queen crown, and is kicking ass doing it, and is almost even a newer version with her kind of hard rock attitude towards being a Scream Queen. So you had a lot of really deserving girls, over the last 20 years who have earned the title as well. But it really is always coming back to Linnea and Brinke and Michelle as the grand mistresses of creating what a modern Scream Queen is.
I felt we had all worked really hard to make that we weren't just going to be another set of boobs on the screen. And then for anybody to come along and say they just wanted to be one. I don't think so. Because, here we are, this Scream Queen circle, and here you are out here. End of game.
I used to say, if you haven't stood in a swamp waist deep in water at midnight for Roger Corman, you're not a scream queen. And I really still believe that. These people, a lot of people never paid their dues. Girls like Brinke, Linnea, and Michelle, they busted their asses in some of the harsh conditions. And that's not to say that a person with a handicap in his backyard isn't faced with harsh conditions, but these were movies that were playing, the movies they were making were playing on HBO, they're playing on Showtime. Some of them are playing in theaters, and they're direct-to-video hits. It's not people selling movies out of their closet or by mail order. These were real films that were playing in real venues. It was a different thing altogether.
So for a while, I kind of didn't enjoy having the title Scream Queen. It had been so sullied at that point that I just wanted to be called an actress, not even a horror actress, just an actress.
There became a time when the home video shelves in stores became full, just like Dawn of the Dead. When there's no more room on the shelves, that was it.
Chains like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video came out and started putting the mom and pop stores out of business.
People could now go to Blockbuster, and instead of going to their local mom and pop store to get Die Hard and discovering that, oops, the 3 copies that the mom and pop store own are out and are on reserve for the next week and a half, they could go right to Blockbuster up the street, and there were 50 copies. So Blockbuster were now in control of the market and weren't buying the B movies at all. So that killed the B movie industry, because now you couldn't make a movie for $300,000 anymore because that money wasn't being made back.
Wow.
How wow?
The whole scene changed, where there was no longer a market for these independent, low-budget B movies.
So, I mean, the 80s was a very special time. 1990 and on, things really changed.
The buyers didn't want that kind of film. It was over. So now it was the realm of the guy with his home video camera in his backyard. And it was left for him to try to beat the horse that the rest of us had already identified as being dead.
The studios, the major studios, start releasing their libraries on video. And a lot of players got into the business, and the banks got out of the business, and a lot of stupid money that came into the business left the business. And it was kind of an unholy collision of the business just sort of, maturing and kind of hitting the reset button. It all seemed to just kind of, fade away.
As the market shrank in the 90s, obviously jobs became fewer and fewer. So you not only had actresses who were now in their late 30s or early 40s, who are no longer suitable for and really no longer want the roles that are written for a nubile 22-year-old, you've got fewer and fewer and fewer opportunities.
I've done like 34 B movies. It's time to move on. You've got to like do something different. There's an age you reach between 30 and 35, I would say, that there aren't a lot of parts for women.
Say, do you have a list of their phone numbers?
What for?
They might need some representation, some counseling, maybe some guidance.
There's this terrible, terrible prejudice, this ageism that goes on in this industry.
In this niche market, where it's always been fairly cutthroat and the jobs have always been fairly small, it was even worse.
You're not really the mom yet, and you're not the ingenue. And like for me, that was like a little part of why I wasn't working at that point.
You mean too old? I will not degrade myself by appearing in one of your third-rate fright fests.
Sabrina, love, you're just not the actress you used to be.
So it became harder and harder to stay in the business and keep doing what I used to be doing, because those kind of movies weren't being made anymore.
So what do you do? And each of them handled this in a different way.
So it must have been like in the early 90s where I kind of took a step back and decided that I'm going to work on my family.
She walked away from it and really didn't care. Brinke, on the other hand, broadened her perspective, went in to essentially the marketing aspect of her likeness on comic books and plastic models and things like that, going to conventions, meeting people, and so forth.
Hang on, Des, my cam is freaking out. I'm still burning that CD. There we go. With the rise of video technology, cameras became more affordable and accessible to the average person. So suddenly any kid who ever wanted to make a backyard movie was able to make one. The technology was there. What I started experiencing was that budgets dropped from $100,000 to $10,000, and I was getting hired by people who had been my fans. They were 9 years old when they saw my movies. Now they were young adults, they were getting out of college, and they wanted to be filmmakers. So they would hire me for a day or two because that's all they could afford, but I was probably half their budget. It was real kamikaze filmmaking, and a lot of it was really abusive.
And Linnea is just kind of there in the middle. Linnea's family and her parents have always been extremely important to her, and their illness, because they were back east in Florida, pretty much took her out of the box for the longest while. She decided that, you know, taking care of them and making sure they were all right was more important than, you know, chasing acting jobs out here. And, you know, there were fewer and fewer of them in any case. I don't know, you know, where you go at the age of 50, 55 as an actress. You have to make the decision. What do I want to do next? What do I want to do with my last act?
I look at my life as 3 acts. Act 1 was a scientist, Act 2 was a screen queen, and Act 3 is going to be as a writer. And I want to take some time now off fandom, to not do so many conventions, to stay at home more and work on my writing. There was a time when I was doing about a dozen movies a year and 12 to 16 conventions a year. Sometimes I would have 4 trips a month, back and forth to the East Coast. It's a lot of wear and tear, and I just can't handle that kind of schedule anymore.
It's hard to keep myself up and out there with being in Florida, but I am doing more films. I just try to do conventions, stay out there, and know people, they don't think I ballooned up to like 500 pounds or I'm dead, which I've heard before. And just, you know, try to stay out in the public eye as much as I can.
Don't you dare! Johnny, it's okay, Johnny. You're back. It's
Oh, it's okay. Hey, baby. Hey, it's okay, yeah. Mommy's here, yeah.
I'm not actively looking for work. From what I understand, Brinke and Linnea are working and they're doing very well, and I'm so glad. I'm just a everyday housewife, girlfriend to my husband. That's all I know. It's just has nothing to do with movies anymore.
Very well, thanks. The chair.
I've been out of the loop so long.